Following breaking news for you this hour, President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have wrapped their phone call this morning where they discussed a range of topics, including trade and the approval of the TikTok deal. In a post on Truth Social, the president says he had a very productive call with President Xi and agreed to meet with him at the APEC summit in South Korea and for President Xi to come to the U.S. at an appropriate time. Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. Willie, thank you for joining us today. What details are you learning from the president's call with President Xi this morning?
Hey there, Mugo. Well, the devil is really in the details, and there aren't very many details, in fact, out of this Truth Social post that the president put online just several moments ago. He did say, as you mentioned, that he did have a productive call with President Xi of China and that the two would continue to speak and that the two men would also meet in South Korea during the APEC summit. That's set to take place in the coming weeks. And he also said at the bottom of that statement, he said he appreciates the TikTok approval. It's unclear what that essentially means. Do we have a deal? What happens to TikTok's algorithm? Of course, parent company ByteDance has pushed back against that law banning TikTok, which President Trump essentially kicked the can down the road in terms of enforcement, saying that his Department of Justice would not enforce that law against tech companies like Apple and Google, which hold TikTok in their app stores. Of course, we know this is an app that is used by millions of people around the U.S., especially when it comes to young people. The president notes as much when he used TikTok during his campaign to reach out to young voters. Clearly, it is something that many Americans want to continue to use, and the president moving forward with this potential deal and this announcement that he put out on social media today without much details in terms of who is buying TikTok, what American companies will be involved in the purchase or divesting or what have you of this company. But still, nonetheless, the president putting that information out there, saying that he spoke with President Xi of China about this potential deal for TikTok. Mugo.
Yeah, it certainly seems like he said a lot in that post, but then there's still a lot of unanswered questions at this time. Willie, the two sides have had issues when it comes to agreeing on trade. So is this call a step in the right direction?
Yeah, it certainly is. Remember, there's a major trade deal that the U.S. hasn't got a final say with China about. There, of course, is that tariff back and forth that we saw earlier this year. And now the two sides kick the can down the road to continue those negotiations on a trade deal. Perhaps China wants to lower its tariff rate. We saw those tariff rates go sky high, really, on Chinese imports into the United States. Also, China retaliated with tariffs of their own. So we'll have to wait and see in terms of how things move forward with that trade deal. And major guess coming from me is that that was part of this conversation on top of all of the other issues. But we could potentially see the two leaders discuss this further, not only over the phone, but when they meet in the coming weeks at the APEC summit in South Korea. And of course, when President Trump, he says he's going to potentially go to China early next year, and then President Xi come here to the U.S. That is certainly a olive branch between the two men or the two leaders for their relationship. But a lot of details yet to be worked out, not only with this TikTok deal, but with the U.S. and China trade deal, that U.S. and China trade deal as well, Mugo.
Yeah, definitely is. Willie James Inman, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time. All right, so that TikTok component is just one of the many elements of complicated trade talks between the world's two largest economies. Tariff negotiations could affect many areas of tech and manufacturing, too. So let's go live now to CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. And Kelly, a lot of headlines will come out of those negotiations. So which industries will you be looking at for the biggest impact?
Yeah, there's a few that really stand out to me, but just to sort of put a point on what Willie was saying, you know, this trade relationship, it is one of the most important in the world. You have two of the biggest economies here, and at the heart of this is the president wanting China to buy more from the U.S., right? There is that trade deficit, meaning that the U.S. buys more from China right now. And so when you think about some of the different areas on other country negotiations where the president has made progress, has gotten concessions, I think you could see similar industries that could benefit if the two sides are going to actually come to a deal. And so particularly the industries that I'm looking at would be energy, because China buys a lot of oil from Russia. We have seen other countries say that they will increase their buying of U.S. oil and energy. So that would be something potentially that is at the heart of these negotiations. And then another would be agriculture. We do, as a country, sell a lot to China, especially in soybean and corn, and that is definitely something from my conversations and reporting with farmers in the heart of America they are hoping comes out of this trade deal, because China, in a previous, in the first Trump administration, really cracked down and utilized the agricultural industry in the U.S. to hurt the U.S. in those trade negotiations. They made it more expensive during those negotiations to buy soybeans from the U.S. They put a tariff of their own on that and ultimately did come to an agreement. But that would be an area that I would look at. So U.S. agriculture. And then finally, tech and everything from chips and whatnot, and we can certainly go into more of that. But the other thing would be rare earths. That is a resource, rare earth minerals that end up being a component of a lot of the technology that we use here, and China has a lock on that. They really have a majority of those resources in China, and that would be something that I know that the U.S. would want to be able to buy more of.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much for joining.